Hey guys, this is Arthur, and you are watching How to Draw Creepy Creatures. Now, a few days ago was Diwali, which, even though I'm not Indian, it's one of my favorite holidays because I eat chicken curry and I watch scary Hindi flicks. And I thought, why didn't I do a creepy creature specifically from Indian culture on that day? And I feel like it was a terrible waste, so I kind of want to make up for it by doing a Hindi creature right here. And I did some research, came up with a few options, but I eventually settled on the Manticore, which some people know what that is, depending on whether or not you play D&D or something like that. But the Manticore is a figure from Hindu mythology, mostly Hindu, sometimes also in Ethiopian, but it was depicted as having a feline body like a lion, being red in color, having a spiked tail like a scorpion, that could shoot spikes kind of like a porcupine, and having a human face. So let's get into it. In fact, one of the earliest mentions of this is actually from Pliny the Elder. Yeah, it's kind of cool. All right, let's start with a human face. Give it very powerful shoulders, kind of like a lion. I'm actually going to draw it crouched, then we can have it in the full frame. Okay. Now, often it's become popular to portray manticores with wings, but in the earliest descriptions they didn't mention it having wings. It was a strictly terrestrial animal, so I kind of prefer to draw it that way. If you can do wings, I mean, if you want to, then bat wings are a good way to go. That usually looks pretty cool. I prefer to draw it based on the original descriptions, though. Now, what's actually kind of interesting is that the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons was the one who popularized the idea of manticores having wings, but one of the earliest accounts of them having wings was from uh, Dante's Divine Comedy, in which there's a character who's the Demon of Lies, who is portrayed as being a manticore. And the reason why is that he has a human face, which he uses to lure people into a false sense of security, and he has a scorpion's tail, which he uses to sting them. And that's used as a metaphor for a liar, someone who presents a smiling face to you that looks harmless, but actually has ill intent. And that was a very powerful analogy. It really pushed the book forward. Absolutely one of my favorite books. But anyway, that was where the idea of a manticore having wings became really popular because Dante portrayed it as having wings. Okay. Okay. Now, some people like to do a segmented scorpion tail for their manticore. I actually prefer to do something like a monkey's tail, something prehensile that you could just imagine it whipping around and stinging you. Okay. I make the tail extra long so that you could imagine that it's just going all over the place, just firing all over the place. Alright, so you should have a very rudimentary image, kind of like that. Okay. And it's also supposed to have a mane. We're not going to draw that now, but we are going to draw the outline of it so that we kind of know where it's supposed to be. Okay. Let's start with the feet a little bit. I imagine them as very lion-like with this extra toe claw here. Now, it's interesting in that Hindu culture, they actually believed that even though the Manticore, whose name means the man-eater in Sanskrit, even though it was this killer animal, they believed it was also a noble creature. So when they found, according to legend, whenever they found baby manticores, they, instead of killing them, they would simply cut off the stinger so that it posed less of a threat to man. Then it was basically just like a big tiger. So they thought that even though it was deadly, it still had a right to exist. I don't like this leg. Something about it is bothering me, so I'm actually going to fix it a little bit. It's kind of like how Hindus view elephants, where they're deadly animals that obviously kill a lot of people each year, but they wouldn't want to harm one because they feel like they're intelligent, noble beings. Just an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, obviously manticores don't exist, so it's not quite the same argument, but okay, trying to draw a little impression of this thumb claw almost. Interestingly, in more recent times, the scientific community has come up with the theory that the manticore was simply just a killer tiger, and that they were so afraid of it that they added extra details. I mean, yeah, that's as plausible a theory as any. The only problem with this is that uh, Indian people obviously know what a tiger is. They were living alongside them at the time, and were perfectly familiar with what that was. You'd think that if anybody could see what was a tiger and what obviously wasn't a tiger, they'd be able to tell the difference. Yeah. And that's the thing about people in the West when looking at these stories. We tend to think of these tribal societies as kind of stupid, like they don't know what they're talking about, but really, I just feel like there must be another. I don't believe manticores exist, but I think that there must be another explanation behind these legends. Because, seriously, villagers who are living next to tigers on a regular basis would actually know what a tiger looks like. Okay. I'm going to give these a little bit more of a bend, make them a little bit longer, because even though he's squatting down, they look just a little bit too short. So I'm going to add on to them, I should say, a little bit. Now, if you really like Hindi culture and you like scary movies, I have to suggest watching the TV show Harmad Pidar. It's kind of like the Hindi version of The Twilight Zone, except the special effects are really, really bad, and the stories are not scary. It's laughably scary, but it's a really interesting look into what life in India in modern times is actually like. So that's why I liked it. Yeah, there's cultural stuff about them that you didn't realize was practiced over there, which makes it very interesting for someone who's interested in exploring other people's cultures. Let's work on the face. Now, the Manticore is typically portrayed as having a human-like face. I like to do a combination between human and animal, so what I do is I kind of give it a cat-like nose, except I give it a slight point to suggest human-like features. Alright. Excuse me. That is just my cat, not a ghost. So, and everybody who's listening who got freaked out there, it's nothing to worry about. I like to give it human eyes. Interestingly, it's portrayed as having blue eyes and red hair, which is very common for supernatural creatures because people in the ancient world didn't really trust people with red hair and blue eyes since it was very uncommon features, so they assumed that there must be something otherworldly and possibly dangerous about it. In fact, what's really interesting about this is that even though the Manticore legend started in India, in medieval times, the legend was transferred over to France, and eventually it built up until the 1600s, where they had massive Manticore hunts because their legend had evolved to the point where they believed that the Manticore could take human form and disguise itself as a person during the daytime and then hunt people at night. So there were lots of people who were unfortunately burned at the stake under suspicion of being Manticores. It's very interesting how the West took that legend and added its own flavor to it. Unfortunate, though, too. It's also really creepy is that the Manticore is often portrayed as grinning. It's not mentioned in the original legends, but it's something that's shown in medieval bestiaries. Yeah, it's also supposed to have 3 rows of teeth, which is how you can identify a human Manticore, somebody who's able to turn a Manticore that's able to take human form. They're supposed to have 3 rows of teeth, which is actually a medical condition. It's a genetic disorder, and so it's kind of like, because people didn't understand what that was, they provided a supernatural explanation for it. It's supposed to have very shark-like teeth, so that's what we're going to do here. Alright, let's kind of add these little lines here, almost like a mustache, to show it's like the bristles where you would see the whiskers on a cat, so that's what I like to add. Now let's work on this mane a little bit. I like to make it kind of spiky so that it matches what will eventually go on the end of the tail. Let's give it like kind of like lynxy almost cat ears. Okay. let's work on the tail. Thing is that a lot of people just draw a scorpion's tail. I just don't think that looks right. I think it's supposed to look vaguely scorpion-like, but also with some other type of features in there. So I like to do a large point. Maybe another point here, like a hook almost. You could imagine it grasping prey with that. Interestingly, another fact about the Manticore is that its name has been given to a neuroses called Manticore Syndrome. It's a form of a narcissistic personality disorder that's been associated with as a symptom of some types of bipolar disorder, in which somebody portrays this charming facade but actually has sinister intentions. They're usually very good at manipulating people and convincing them that they're trustworthy. Just like a manticore will convince people in the forest that it's actually a person by not showing the rest of its body until you get up close and realize, geez, that thing has a Cheshire Cat smile. So it's actually in some ways related to the skinwalker in some ways from a mythological point of view. I like to do a tapered tail. I like to do it very much like a monkey. Something that's like, can just whip around. Also, I'm going to fill in this by sometimes you see lions have a lot of extra body hair that goes down here, stemming down from the mane and just traveling down the chest. So I'm going to do that. Also, the manticore is supposed to have spikes that it can shoot from its tail so that it can hit you with some venomous darts that will paralyze you, and then it can go in for the kill with its big stinger. So that's what we're going to do. I like to make them vary in size because I kind of imagine that it shot some of them already, and so new ones are growing back. I actually see that a scorpion has these venomous hairs growing from its tail that it uses to spike its prey before it actually goes in with the big stinger. So it's possible that ancient people observed this in the wild, and so they simply incorporated this into the Manticore legend. Alright, now let's do some finer detail. Alright, this is what we got so far. I always forget to turn this light on. There we go. This is what we got so far. Now let's do some finer details. Alright. I like to give it stripes because I imagine that it's blending in with the forest. So kind of imagine like a deep orange, dark orange body with bright red stripes. Which is interesting because on the one hand it provides camouflage. On the other hand, red, the color red, is usually a chemical signal in the wild indicating to other animals that it's poisonous, so don't mess with me. So from an evolutionary point of view, it actually makes a lot of sense that if manticores existed, that they would be red in color or bright colors. In fact, even though it's a mammal, well, it looks very much like a mammal, it's actually plausible for it to be venomous. Like, for instance, monotremes, which are closely related to mammals, in which the duck-billed platypus is a member, have venomous claws. They're one of the only mammal-like creatures that have that. So this idea of a venomous mammal does occur in nature, so there's some parts of this legend that are true. In fact, I forgot to add claws here, so add some claws to the toes. kind of keep the stripe pattern dappled and irregular, because in real animals, a stripe pattern is as unique as a fingerprint. So they're always in dappled, irregular patterns that's unique to each individual. So come up with an individual pattern for each of your manticores that you draw. Yeah, so it'll look more realistic. So I'm going to draw some stripes on the face a little bit now, traveling down the mane like you would see in a lynx. Yeah, lynx often has stripes on the face as well. Alright, now we're going to add some shading. We're going to add some dimples around here so that's a bit more defined. Okay, remember smooth, steady circles. In fact, I imagine the coloring as kind of similar to what you would see in a golden tiger, but you can do whatever coloring you want. The original colors described in the legend are bright red, maybe some golds, but you can experiment as you like. I've seen people do manticores in green, and really, it just doesn't seem right. But that's just my opinion. You could do whatever you like. Okay. Alright. Shade around the nose and the facial features just a little bit. Okay. Let's fill in these lines because so much detail got lost when we shaded. Okay. Okay. Sign up with your artwork. And you have just drawn the Manticore. Okay, like, share, and subscribe. And anybody who wants to make a suggestion for any type of creature that they want me to do a tutorial on, just leave it in the comments. It's nothing, as long as it's nothing too freaky. Trying to keep it family friendly. And oh yeah, anybody who finished a lesson from these tutorial videos and wants to show off their art, you can send it to me at arthurwrotethis@gmail.com. As long as you give me your written permission, I will include your name in the video so that everybody knows that you did it. Alright, happy belated Diwali, you guys, and goodbye.